My name is Debbie Reynolds. I'm 74 years old, and this place I've called home for over 4 decades, wasn't just wood and brick. It was life, laughter, sacrifice, and love. James and I built it together piece by piece. We moved in as newlyweds and filled every creaking floorboard with memories. He called me Sunshine the day we met in 1973 when I wore a yellow dress to a church picnic. He said I lit up the whole field, and even in his final days, when his voice was no more than a breath, he still whispered, "Sunshine, you still light up the room." We had one child, Michael, our miracle baby. After years of complications and dashed hopes, I held him for the first time and knew I'd give anything to protect that tiny heartbeat. And I did. We did. James and I gave him everything. When Michael wanted to attend business school, we refinanced the house. When he launched his first company, we gave part of James's pension. We told ourselves, this is what parents do. And for a time it felt worth it. Michael brought his wife Sophia home for holidays. He sent flowers on my birthday. He smiled and made polite conversation, but over time that smile became thinner. His visits shorter. The warmth faded. Still, I believed it was just life. Grown-up children get busy. They forget to call, but they still love you. Right? Then James got sick. Pancreatic cancer took him fast. From diagnosis to hospice, less than 10 months. I never left his side. I bathed him, fed him, wiped his tears and mine. Michael came sometimes, always with his laptop, whispering with Sophia in the hall. And one day, James reached across the kitchen table, thinner than I had ever seen him, and said, "Debbie, I need to talk about something serious." I braced myself for more medical decisions, but he said, "I've updated the will." He looked straight into my eyes. "Michael, he's different now." I didn't want to hear that. I shook my head. "He's just stressed love." "No," James whispered. "He's positioning himself. You need to be ready when I'm gone." I didn't understand. I didn't want to. Then the day came. After James passed, Michael started coming around more, too much too soon. He scheduled a meeting with the estate attorney and said Sophia would attend too. I baked a pie, set out the good teacups. I thought we'd sit and remember James as a family. But Michael stood at the study door and said, "This is between family, Mom. We'll let you know later." I laughed. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He closed the door. And just like that, 45 years of marriage, of raising a son, of sacrificing every comfort was dismissed like background noise. I stood in the hallway surrounded by family portraits, holidays I cooked for, birthdays I planned, and realized I wasn't part of their definition of family anymore. That was the first crack. The first tear in the illusion that love was always enough. But I didn't cry. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself tea. My hands trembled, but inside, something woke up. I didn't sleep that night. The study light was off, but James's presence lingered in the silence, wrapping around me like an old quilt. I sat at the kitchen table, the brass key clutched in my palm like a relic from a forgotten war. James had pressed it into my hand 2 weeks before he passed, whispering with fading breath, "Only after I'm gone, when you see who they really are, sunshine." At the time I thought it was his grief talking, or pain, or fear of leaving me alone, but now I understood. He had seen something I had chosen not to. The way Michael avoided eye contact, the whispered conversations between him and Sophia, the estate attorney meeting I'd been excluded from, and now that key. The next morning, I put on my navy wool coat, James's favorite, the one he said made my eyes look like a lake, and drove to Valley Trust Bank off Cedar Lane. The parking lot was quiet, just a few cars, and the morning sun fighting through the clouds. The manager recognized my name. "Your husband left very clear instructions, Mrs. Reynolds," he said gently, leading me through a corridor that smelled of lemon polish and secrets. "He said you'd come." One day, he brought out box 209 and left me alone in a private room. I turned the brass key. A soft click. Inside was a small manila envelope with Debbie written in James's neat handwriting, a USB drive wrapped in one of his old handkerchiefs, and a worn leather folder labeled Power of Attorney and Financials. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. There it was, James's updated will signed and notarized just 6 months before he passed. I scanned every line, heart pounding. He had left everything to me: the house, the savings, the pension, everything. There was a clause about Michael, a modest trust, but it came with a condition: continued ethical conduct toward the surviving spouse. James knew. He had seen the shift in Michael, the calculation behind the smiles, the coldness behind the helpfulness. I returned home in a daze. The sunlight in the kitchen felt unfamiliar, like it didn't belong in a house grieving 2 deaths James's, and the death of my illusion about our son. Michael called that evening. "Hi, Mom," he said, too cheerful. "Just checking in. We're almost done wrapping up the estate. Just a few signatures away." I stared at the folder in front of me. "I'm fine," I replied, voice flat. Good, good. I thought I'd drop by later this week. Maybe bring some croissants." "Sure," I said. "See you then." I hung up and placed the USB drive beside my tea. I didn't press play, not yet. I needed to hold on to the memory of James, the strong one, the one who called me sunshine, just a little longer. But 2 days later, the truth kicked my front door. It was late morning. I had just folded the last towel when the doorbell rang. 2 strangers stood on the porch, a tall man in a crisp blazer and a young woman with a clipboard. "Hi there. We're here for the showing," she said brightly. "Showing," I repeated, confused. "Yes, this is 134 Oak Ridge Lane." "Right. Your son said we could come by a little early." The agent gave us the green light. My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry." A showing of what I asked. The man showed me his phone screen, my address, my house, my home. My breath caught. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "There's been a mistake," and closed the door gently. I stood in the foyer, surrounded by the smiling faces of a family that no longer existed. Birthdays, graduations, Christmases, and I realized Michael was trying to erase me. Not move me, not protect me, erase me. That night, I made tea with shaking hands and finally opened the USB. James appeared on screen. Older, thinner, pale, but his eyes, those kind, stubborn eyes, hadn't changed. "Debbie," he began, "if you're watching this, then you've seen the truth." He explained everything. How he noticed missing funds from their joint accounts. How Michael had started using an old expired power of attorney. How he overheard them discussing simplifying your life, researching retirement homes, meeting with financial advisors without telling us. "They're not protecting you, Debbie. They're removing you." My hand covered my mouth. I couldn't breathe. James had hired a private investigator. He had recorded conversations, documented financial activity. He knew confrontation wouldn't work. Michael would gaslight us, twist the story. So instead, James gathered proof. He trusted me to act. And now, it was time. I sat at James's old desk and opened the leather folder. Inside were printed statements, copies of forged documents, and a handwritten list of dates, all cataloged like breadcrumbs leading me back to myself. By sunrise, I knew what I had to do. I didn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't grief keeping me awake, it was clarity. I had sat in silence for too long. For weeks I had tiptoed through my own house like a guest. I had boiled tea to calm shaking hands. I had cried into shirts that still smelled like James. But now I moved differently. Not because I was afraid, because I was watching. The next morning, Michael came by with croissants like nothing had happened. He placed the bag on the counter casually, as if he hadn't sent strangers to preview my home like I was already gone. We're getting close, he said. Final paperwork should be in by next week. We'll handle the transfer smooth as silk. I smiled. That's good to hear. He looked surprised by how calm I was. I poured coffee into our old blue mugs, James's favorite set, and handed him one. I didn't flinch, not even when Sophia walked in scrolling on her phone pretending I didn't exist. After they left, I opened the brown folder again, the one from the bank. I examined every signature, every date, every forged line. I compared them to my real signature. They were close practiced, too practiced. Then came the envelope from the mailbox, a letter from a loan office I didn't recognize, a notice of non-payment on a personal line of credit. In my name. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Then slowly, I went to the kitchen drawer and pulled out the second folder, James' old expense book. Tucked inside was a name written in pencil, Walter Griffin, attorney. Trust everything to him. I called him. He answered on the second ring. Have you seen the video? He asked without introduction. Yes, I said. James was thorough, he said. He loved you very much. He wanted to make sure you'd have every tool you needed. The next day, I put on lipstick for the first time in months. I wore the navy blouse with pearl buttons and pinned my hair back the way James always liked. I wasn't dressing for anyone else. I was dressing for battle. Walter greeted me in his small, orderly office. No extravagance, just dark wood, tall filing cabinets, and quiet confidence. He slid a thick folder across the desk. Inside, a full copy of James's final will, a notarized neurological evaluation proving he was of sound mind, and a handwritten log of suspicious financial moves Michael had made over the last 18 months. Bank transfers, real estate inquiries, conversations with advisors. There was a transaction for $20,000 withdrawn the week James was in the ICU, and worse photos. Michael and Sophia touring retirement communities, smiling, pointing at floor plans, taking notes. Not with me. About me. I stared at the photos until they blurred. I wasn't being considered. I was being handled. I wasn't a part of the plan. I was the plan. And that changed everything. That night, I opened the house listing on my laptop. Photos of my living room, my kitchen, even my bedroom, posted online without my consent. Under the owner field, Michael Reynolds. Not James, not me, just Michael. I wasn't even a name anymore. I was a liability. That's when I knew this wouldn't be a conversation. This would be a confrontation on my terms. I gathered everything. The updated will, the evaluation, the forged documents, the financial records, the photos. I placed them neatly into a blue leather folder. Then I called Walter. It's time, I said. He didn't ask for confirmation. He simply said, I'll be ready. Sunday morning arrived with overcast skies and a strange stillness in the air. I woke early, not from worry, from resolve. I pressed my navy blouse, the one with the pearl buttons. James always said it brought out the strength in my shoulders. I brushed my hair, applied a soft pink lipstick, and zipped the blue leather folder into my tote bag, the one with everything. Michael and Sophia arrived 5 minutes late as always. They strolled in coffee cups in hand, all smiles and rehearsed charm. Mom, this won't take long, Michael said, patting my shoulder like I was a neighbor needing help with the trash. We've outlined a plan, Sophia added, already laying out color-coded documents across the dining table. We just want to make sure you feel included. Included. That word tasted bitter in my mouth. They led me to the table, my table where I once hosted Thanksgiving dinners, where James carved the turkey, where Michael opened birthday presents as a child. Now it was a battlefield, covered in budget charts and care facility brochures. Michael cleared his throat. We think it's time to simplify things, Mom. The house is big. The market is hot. You'd be more comfortable in a community tailored to your needs. He slid a glossy brochure toward me. We've already scheduled a showing, Sophia added, and pre-qualified you for a lovely unit private garden. Full service meals, nurse on call. You'll love it. My hand stayed still, no protest, no drama. I reached into my tote bag, pulled out my blue leather folder, and placed it quietly atop their papers. Michael blinked. What's that? Something you forgot to include in your plan, I said. I opened the folder and slid out the updated will. This is your father's true final testament, signed 6 months before he passed. Sophia leaned over, reading quickly, her face drained of color. Michael snatched it, skimming the pages. This can't be right, he muttered. Dad would have told me. He did, I said. He told me. And now you're reading it. But everything to you, Sophia whispered. He left everything to you, I nodded. Yes. And you'll find he included a clause about ethical conduct. Shall we review that? Michael's eyes narrowed. You can't handle all this alone, Mom. You're 74. You need help. I have help, I said calmly. I have legal counsel, and I have every document needed to prove what you've done. I reached back into the folder and laid out copies of the forged loan documents, credit applications in my name, and the photos of their real estate visits. Sophia's jaw clenched. Michael turned pale. I remember signing these with you, Mom, he said quickly. When Dad was sick, you must have forgotten, no, Michael. I didn't forget, and neither did the bank. I looked at both of them. My hands didn't shake. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. A quiet, calculated one. Silence followed, long and heavy. Sophia broke it with venom. You think you can keep this house forever? What are you going to do? Live here alone until you fall down the stairs? Maybe, I said softly. Or maybe I'll leave one day because I decide to. Not because someone tried to erase me. Michael stood slowly, jaw tight. We'll contest this. You can try, I replied. But the will has already been filed with probate court. The medical evaluations are notarized, and every transaction you made is documented. More silence. Then Michael exhaled shakily. You blindsided us. I smiled. Now you know how I felt. They left not long after. No screaming, no slamming doors, just silence. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't felt in months: peace. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply stood in the hallway and exhaled. For the first time in months, I wasn't holding my breath anymore. The truth was no longer a quiet suspicion. It had been spoken, revealed, and seen. The next morning, I called a locksmith. I'd like to have all the locks changed, I told him. Today. By noon, every door and window in the house had a new key, and I held all of them. The sound of each click was like a small reclaiming of safety, of space, of self. Then I called utility companies and transferred everything back into my name: electricity, water, internet. I didn't ask for permission. I just did it. I stood in the living room afterward, watching the late sunlight spill across the hardwood floors. I whispered, "This is mine." Not in defiance, not in vengeance, just in quiet truth. I didn't know what came next. I had no grand plan or dramatic exit, but I knew I needed to make room not just in closets or drawers, but in my life. So I started small. I shredded old paperwork, boxes of statements, and lists that James had kept just in case. I donated 3 boxes of unused kitchenware. I folded away old linens that still smelled faintly of lavender. Then I walked down the hallway, the same one where Michael had once blocked me from entering, James's study, and took down the photos. Not out of hate, out of clarity. The pictures of Michael and Sophia at Christmas, their wedding photo, the ones of them holding our grandchildren who barely knew my name. I placed them in a storage box, except for one. Michael's 5th birthday. He was covered in cake, laughing so hard his eyes disappeared into crescents. James was beside him mid-laugh, a party hat tilted on his head. I kept that photo, not to remember who Michael became, but to remember who he once was. I placed it gently into a drawer. Not out of bitterness, out of peace. That same afternoon, I took a walk around the garden. James and I had planted it together each spring, our ritual for decades. Tulips were pushing up along the fence line, red and gold, James's favorites. I bent down and touched one of the shoots, whispering, "You came back." Later that week, I went to the community center down the street. There was a watercolor class posted on the bulletin board. I signed up. "I haven't painted in years," I told the instructor. She smiled. "Then you're overdue." Every Tuesday, I joined a circle of women my age, painting flowers and skies and fruit that never looked quite right. But it didn't matter. I was creating again. At night, I cooked small meals just for me. I turned James's old study into a reading room. I opened the curtains wider, let the light in. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't escape. It was restoration. One morning, I opened the mailbox and found a cream envelope with Michael's handwriting. Inside was a simple card. No long letter, no excuses. Just one sentence. "If you're willing, I'd like to talk." I held it in my hands for a long time. Then I folded it gently and placed it into my journal. I didn't call, not yet. I whispered to the quiet of the house, "Maybe, but not on your terms." 6 months had passed since that Sunday morning, the morning I quietly took my life back. The house felt different now. Not haunted, not abandoned, just mine. I had rearranged the furniture, nothing major. The dining table was closer to the window where the sunlight poured in during breakfast. The old reading chair was now next to the fireplace, where James once read the paper. The guest room, once reserved for Michael and his family, was now a warm space filled with spools of thread, half-finished quilts, and open books. The silence in the house no longer felt like absence. It felt like peace. I still kept a photo of James on my nightstand. Him in that rumpled brown flannel shirt he refused to throw away. Some nights I'd still talk to him. "The tulips are blooming," I'd whisper. "I fixed the garden gate myself today. I wore the navy blouse, the one you always liked." I didn't always wait for answers, but somehow I felt them. Michael hadn't called since the letter. No follow-up, no voicemail, just that quiet, simple sentence. "If you're willing, I'd like to talk." I hadn't responded, not out of anger, but because I needed time. Time to stop being who they tried to reduce me to. One Sunday, Robert stopped by, James's oldest friend, now a gentle widower himself. He brought croissants and raspberry jam. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. "You've made this place feel new again," he said, placing the pastries on the counter. I smiled, warming our coffee. "It still creaks in all the same places." He chuckled and glanced at the window. "James would be proud of you." My eyes stung, but I didn't cry. That spring, I built raised garden beds with Robert's help. We painted the edges. Robin's egg blue, a color James once said reminded him of summer skies. Neighbors began to wave more often when they passed. Some stopped by and asked what I was planting. I gave them Time Basil even flowers. And in return, I received something I never expected: conversation. Friendship, laughter, not every day, but enough. And then on a Tuesday afternoon, just as I was wiping down the kitchen counters, the phone rang. I recognized the number. I paused, then picked up. "Hi, Mom," Michael's voice said. It was smaller than I remembered, hesitant, not polished like before. I said nothing. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I've started therapy. Sophia and we're separated now, so I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know I've been thinking a lot. Still, I said nothing. My fingers traced the edge of the counter. He cleared his throat. Would it be okay if I called again sometime? I inhaled deeply, then spoke soft but steady. Yes, but not to talk about the past, only the present. If you want to know me now, you start here. He exhaled slowly. Okay. Then silence again. Thank you, he whispered and hung up. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window as the wind stirred the garden. It wasn't closure, but it was a beginning. And more importantly, it was on my terms. The summer sun settled softly on the porch railings, warming the fresh coat of robin egg blue paint. I sat at James's old desk now, mine watching dust motes drift through a square of sunlight. Beside my teacup lay a thick leather-bound notebook. The title page held only 2 words written in my neatest hand, The Quiet Room. It was what I'd begun calling the study, the place Michael once barred me from, the place where silence tried to erase me. Now it was where I wrote myself back in. Each morning I filled 2 pages. 1. A memory worth keeping. 2. A lesson worth passing on. Some days the memories sang James in his yellow raincoat, chasing our toddler through puddles. Some days they ached a hospital room, a son distracted by emails while his father fought for breath. Yet every entry ended with a small defiant note, I am still here. On the 5th Tuesday of the month, my watercolor class surprised me with a tiny gallery day. Our crooked landscapes hung on twine between 2 oak trees. Neighbors wandered by, praising colors that bled in the July heat. When they reached my piece, a simple vase of tulips, one woman touched my arm. Your reds feel alive, she said. I thanked her and did not mention that the reds were James's favorite, or that I'd painted them from memory of the spring he died. That evening, the phone rang again. I recognized Michael's number but felt no spike of fear, only curiosity. Hi, Mom, he said. His voice still carried that careful gentleness, like someone walking across ice they know might crack. He talked about therapy, how his counselor asked him to list the last time he'd felt genuine joy, and he'd realized he couldn't remember. He paused, waiting for me to rescue him from the silence. I didn't. Finally, he asked, What have you been up to? I planted lettuce, I said, and I'm writing a memoir, for myself mostly. Another pause. Can I read it one day? If you earn the right. I replied, soft, not cruel. He swallowed. I'd like to try. We spoke for 10 minutes. No talk of money houses or the past, only present steps. When we hung up, I noted the date in my journal, first call, that didn't hurt. Weeks rolled into August. The garden overflowed. Basil perfumed the air, marigolds lined the beds like tiny suns. Robert installed a bench beneath the maple so I could write outside. Sometimes he stayed reading the paper while I scribbled. One afternoon, a padded envelope arrived by courier. Inside, a slim paperback, Healing After Harm, and a handwritten note from Michael. I don't know if this helps, but it helps me. M. I traced the ink. It was the first time he hadn't used Mom as a transactional preface. I placed the book on my desk unopened. Healing, I had learned, isn't a race. It's a garden you plant, water, wait, and hope. That night, I wrote a new lesson at the bottom of the page. Bridges don't rebuild in one stormless day. They grow plank by plank, each nailed with truth. And beneath it, in smaller script, he may be carrying wood. 3 weeks after the envelope arrived, he knocked. Not called, not texted. He came to the front porch like someone visiting a stranger, back straight, eyes cautious. I saw him through the lace curtain. For a moment I froze. The last time he stood on that porch, he was leading strangers through my house. Now he stood alone. No clipboard, no plan, no Sophia. Just Michael. I opened the door. He didn't speak at first. His hands fumbled with something in his coat pocket. Finally, he looked up. Hi, Mom, I nodded. Hi. Can I? Come in. The air between us was tight like stretched fabric. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, glancing around, like everything was both familiar and foreign. His eyes paused at the walls, now missing the family portraits. Then at the new bench in the hallway. The sun-colored tulip vase on the side table. This place looks different, he said quietly. I do too, I replied. We sat in the living room, he on the edge of the armchair, I in James's rocker. He held a paper bag on his lap. I brought you croissants, he said, from that place you like. I didn't tell him they'd changed recipes last spring. that they weren't as flaky anymore, that I now preferred the ones from the Sunday market down the hill. But I accepted the bag and set it on the coffee table. He cleared his throat. I've been going to therapy twice a week. It's hard. Mostly about control and guilt. I waited. I was angry, he continued. Not just at you. At life. At losing Dad. At failing my business. I blamed you because you were the easiest one to reach. I stayed silent. He looked down. When you shut that blue folder in front of me, I realized how little I knew you anymore, how much I'd stopped seeing you as a person. I didn't speak for a long while. Then I said, "You tried to remove me like I was a task, like closing a tab." He winced. "I know. And I hate that I let myself become that version of me." There was no reply needed. The wind outside whistled faintly through the tulips in the garden. Then he asked, "Why did you keep that photo of my birthday?" I blinked. He gestured to the mantel where I'd placed the photo of him at 5 frosting on his cheeks. James mid-laughed beside him. I answered softly, because that boy deserved to be remembered, and maybe someday that boy will walk back through the door. He swallowed, then whispered, "I'd like to be him again." I nodded. "But you don't get to skip the work." I know. We didn't hug, but we didn't need to. When he left, I didn't cry. I returned to the garden and watered the lettuce. One of the shoots had curled into a strange shape, bent but still growing, and I thought, that's what forgiveness looks like. Michael returned the following Sunday. No appointment, no expectations, just a knock, just him. He carried a bag of lemons this time. "I thought maybe you'd like to make your lemon bars," he said. I let him in. The house was clean breezy with lavender. James's reading chair stood like a quiet witness in the corner. We didn't speak much as I pulled out sugar and flour. Michael washed dishes I didn't ask him to. When I handed him the whisk, our hands brushed. His fingers hesitated a silent apology. I told my therapist. He said that I was scared of being irrelevant. I looked up. He continued, "When Dad got sick, and I failed with the business. Everything felt like it was slipping. I tried to tighten my grip on the house, the finances, even on you." "You didn't try to hold on," I said. "You tried to control." He nodded slowly. "I know." We poured the mixture into the pan and slid it into the oven. The kitchen filled with a smell that used to mean holidays, now soaked in healing. Over tea, he pulled out a folded page, handwritten. "I've started writing letters," he said, "to people I've hurt. Not to send, just to write. This one was for you." He placed it on the table. I didn't open it. Not yet. "I'm not asking for a clean slate," he said. "Just space. To keep showing up." We sat in silence. Not the cold kind. The kind that allows room for breath. Then he noticed the blue notebook on the shelf. "Is that your memoir?" "Yes." "Have you written about me?" "Yes." He flinched slightly. "Do I come out the villain?" "You come out human," I said. He closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. As the lemon bars cooled, we moved to the garden. He helped me prune the basil and tie up the tomatoes. When a bee landed on his arm, he laughed like he hadn't in years. Later, I sat alone with his letter. I unfolded the page. His handwriting was messier than when he was younger, but honest. He talked about watching me from the hallway that day when he shut the study door. He admitted he had rehearsed it. With Sophia, planned it like a presentation. He ended the letter with, "I thought love meant strategy. I see now that it means presence. I wasn't present, Mom. I'm sorry." That night I didn't cry. I added a new page to my memoir instead. Sometimes forgiveness is not a grand speech, but a seat left at the table just in case someone returns with humility. Autumn arrived slowly, golden and quiet. The garden faded from color into copper and brown, but the house remained warm. My morning still began with tea and 2 pages of writing. The leather-bound notebook was nearly full now. The quiet room had become more than a title. It was my legacy. Michael called every Sunday now. Sometimes we spoke 5 minutes, sometimes 50. He never asked for anything, He never assumed. Once I asked him, "What made you change?" He paused before answering. "You stopped waiting for me, and I realized I'd been waiting for you to rescue me." I thought of James in that final video, his voice firm, even as his body weakened. "They're not protecting you, Debbie. They're removing you." But James had also believed in me, in my strength. And now I believed in it too. One morning I printed a copy of the final chapter of my memoir. I folded it neatly, slipped it into an envelope, and mailed it to Michael. 2 days later he called. I read it 3 times, he said, voice hoarse. That last line, it broke me. I smiled softly. It was meant to. That final line. You don't get to rewrite the story you ruined, but you can help write the next one. The following weekend, Michael asked if he could visit again this time, not just for lemon bars. "I'd like to help you clean out the attic," he offered. I hesitated. The attic was James's domain, full of labeled boxes, old record players, forgotten Christmas ornaments. But I said yes. We spent the afternoon shoulder to shoulder dust, rising around us like old memories. He laughed at the cassette tapes, cried at a letter James had written him at 18, but never gave. When we came down, I brewed tea. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he stood by the empty chair across from me. "Is it okay?" He asked quietly if I sit. I nodded. "Yes, that's your chair, but only if you come as my son. Not my savior, not my replacement. Just Michael." He sat down slowly, and for the first time in years, we shared a cup of tea, not as roles, not as debts, but as people. Later that night, I wrote one final page in my memoir. Then I closed the notebook, not because the story was over, but because I had found my peace. The rest was still being written together. Dear reader, dear listener, dear fellow, heart learning to heal. If you're reading this, perhaps something in my story felt familiar. Maybe you too have stood outside a closed door, one that once opened with laughter, now shut by someone you loved. Maybe you've poured your life into a family, a child, a home, only to one day feel like a footnote in your own chapter. If that's you, I want to tell you something. You are not invisible. You are not a burden. You are not too late, too quiet, or too soft. You are still here, and that matters more than you know. Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's not about letting someone walk back in without truth. Forgiveness is a boundary, not a door swinging wide. It's a place you build, not to erase what hurt you, but to outgrow it. When my son shut me out, I thought I was losing my story. But what I realized is that I had only finished a chapter, and I had the pen in my hand. The entire time, I wrote myself back in, and so can you. Maybe your family never apologized. Maybe your child never returned. Maybe the people who hurt you have moved on as if you were a ghost in your own home. That does not make your love any less real. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay. Not stay in harm, but stay in truth. Stay with yourself. Stay with your strength. I hope you find your version of the quiet room, a place where no one gets to erase you, where your presence is the ink and your voice writes the next chapter. With quiet courage, Debbie.